Hi, Brian Moran back again. Talking about the 12-week year, and in past videos I've talked about 12-week year planning and how it's different than traditional planning in three ways. One, there's greater predictability. Two, 12-week planning is more focused. And then three, and finally, that 12-week planning, how it's structured, right? The plan is structured for implementation. The only reason we plan is because it helps you execute. Because that's everything we do is designed to help drive better results faster through more effective execution. How you structure your plan, though, has a big impact on the execution and ultimately how quickly the results come online. So some of you have asked, well, talk more about that last piece, that structure piece. Show me what a good 12-week plan, how it should be structured, what it looks like. So that's what I want to do in this video. And when we look at 12-week planning, 12-week plans have two levels. They have goals and they have tactics. And the first is to really understand what's a goal and what's a tactic. And so I want you to think of goals as outcomes, tactics as actions. Now the question I ask when I talk to people is, what do I have greater control over, the actions or the outcomes? And the answer is the actions. Right? We don't control the outcomes, we desire the outcomes, we influence the outcomes, we control the actions. I want you to think of the goals as outcomes. And for some of you, that may be different. Some of you have been taught, never set a goal you can't control. That's crap. That's what a goal is. It's an outcome. You don't control it. You desire it. We control the actions. So we've got to get that relationship right. So the first level is the goal level. And if you've read our stuff or if you've heard me speak before, we always talk about less is more. And the reason is because you have limited capacity. So one goal is better than two, two's better than three. We really recommend three or less. But in the end, it's your plan, you decide. But I'm going to show you an example of a goal as an outcome. And I'm going to take an example that maybe all of us can relate to at some point in our life, and that is losing weight. So I might have a goal of weighing a certain amount, or let's say just for this example, my goal is to lose 20 pounds. That's the goal. Okay. That's an outcome. We have some people that will write the goal, I'm going to work out 4 days a week. And the problem with that as a goal is it's not an outcome, it's an action. And when it's not attached to anything higher, what happens is it loses traction, and in a couple weeks it becomes drudgery. So we want to make sure that when you write your goal, when you set your goal, that it is an outcome. The other thing you'll notice about this, and it's true of any goal-setting program you've ever listened to, is it's specific and measurable. Right? In this case, we can quantify it, 20 pounds. You may have some goals that you can't quantify, in which case you have to qualify them. You got to think about what's different 12 weeks from today. How will I know it? Because here's the key. If we can't define where there is, then you can't build a plan for it. And so the example I like to use, improving my marriage is something that's difficult to quantify. But I can't measure it. I can't set a goal for date night because date night's an action. And I like to joke, in my case, date night could actually hurt my marriage. I do hope that's a joke, but nevertheless, it's an action. It's not an outcome. I got to think about, what do I want different 12 weeks from today in my marriage, and then would date night contribute to that or not? Okay, so the goal is the first level. It's the highest level, specific and measurable. Quantify it, qualify it. The tactics then are the actions. There are the things we can control. And what I'm going to show you is that this is where 12-week planning departs from traditional planning in a big way, in that most plans are conceptual or directional. They're not tactical. So the way we define a tactic is it's a sentence. It typically starts with a verb, and it describes an action you can take. Did you catch that? It's a sentence, starts with the verb, describes an action you can take. So let me give you some tactics for getting in shape, for losing weight. Now, you might choose a different set of tactics. Don't get hung up on the tactics that I pick. But I want you to notice that they're sentences, they start with a verb, and most importantly, they describe the action. So let's say the first thing I'm going to do, the first tactic I'm going to take on is I am going to download the Weight Watchers app, because I know that's a really good app. It's a great way to track your food intake, and if you stick with it, it works. Now, that's a one-time tactic. You're going to see tactics that Some are do one time, some are recurring. This is a one-time tactic, but you will notice it describes the action I can take. When that shows up in my plan, there's no question about what I'm supposed to do. I've got to go get the app. Tactic 2, enter food intake into Weight Watchers app daily. Same thing. Describes the action I can take. Unlike this one, though, this one's recurring. This happens every week. And that's really why I want to separate those two tactics. A third tactic might be to order superfoods. If you're not familiar with superfoods, it's wheatgrass, fish oil, spirulina. It's stuff that makes you healthy from the inside out. If you're not familiar with that, go check out my buddy Chris Johnson at ontargetliving.com. You'll learn about that. 4 then would be take superfoods daily. Again, 2 different tactics. One is ordering at one time, the other is recurring. Another tactic might be to train with weights 4 times per week. And I might have another one that says train with cardio, do cardio 3 times a week for 20 minutes or whatever. You get the idea though. Again, don't get hung up on my example of what I'm choosing for tactics, but I want you to notice their sentences, they start with a verb, and most importantly, they describe the action you can take. Now, if you've never planned this way, sometimes people go, wow, that seems like overkill, right? It's very granular, and it is granular, but it's not overkill, because if we're going to execute it, we have to get this granular. The other thing you'll find when you start to plan this way is it gets uncomfortable. Because when we plan conceptually, there's a lot of wiggle room in there. When we plan tactically, all that wiggle room is wrung out. There is literally nowhere to hide in this plan. But that's the way we want it. If you want to perform at your best, that's the kind of plan we got to create. And the other good news is you don't have to be perfect with the execution. So if you've seen our material before, you know that it's not about being perfect. It's just about being more consistent with the things that matter most. But we've got to get to a plan that's granular, that's tactical, where the statements in the plan describe the action you or someone on the team takes. So if this were a team plan, some of these tactics might be assigned to me, some might be assigned to other team members. But I want you to notice how granular it is, how the structure is. A goal that's specific and measurable, tactics that describe the action you can take. Now, at the tactic level, just like at the goal level, less is more because you have limited capacity. So what we're not looking for is a long laundry list of tactics. What we're searching for are the critical few. People ask me, Brian, what's the right number of tactics for any given goal? And the answer is this: the least number to accomplish the goal. Not the least number, otherwise every goal would have one tactic. The least number to accomplish the goal. It might be 5, it might be 15, it might be 50. As an organization, our leadership team plans as a team, right? We have a goal, and there's different tactics, and some have my name, some have Karen, some have Michael's, that type of thing. We have some goals that have 40, 50 tactics. Now, believe it or not, that's the least number to accomplish it. So the more focused it is, the more powerful it is. But if you don't get the structure right, then the execution becomes really, really difficult. When you get the structure right, now you've teed yourself up to execute at your best level. And 3 things come about when we plan tactic like this. The first is that we know what matters most for the next 12 weeks. Because if this is the critical few, then that's the stuff that really matters in terms of hitting the goal. The second thing is that we know the magnitude of the work. When you plan conceptually, it masks the effort. So you've got this one statement that is really a whole series of tactics. And so it seems like it's not that much work, and it's a lot of work. Here you'll know exactly how much work is involved in hitting the goal. The third benefit to planning tactically like this, and I think it may be the biggest benefit, is that when we plan tactically, it leaves a breadcrumb trail. You will know specifically which actions worked and which ones didn't. And that's really critical because if you're not hitting the goal, the breakdown's in one of two areas. It's in the plan content, I don't have the right stuff in there, or it's in the execution. Typically, it's in the execution. But because we're planning tactically, you'll know. And you'll quickly decipher for you what best practices are given your goal, given your desires. Okay, I hope this is helpful. I hope it's not too much detail. A goal that's specific and measurable, that's an outcome. Tactics that are statements that describe the action you can take. And again, the least number to accomplish the goal. And each of those tactics have a due date. Some of them are due once, like this is week 1. Some are recurring, weeks 1 through 12. Week 1, 1 through 12, 1 through 12, that type of thing. And so depending on your plan, some of them will be recurring, some will be one time. Really doesn't matter, just put the due dates on. Because then that flows to your weekly plan, which is part of process control. And we'll talk about that in another video. But now you've got your whole 12 weeks laid out. You know what matters most for the 12 weeks. Because you have due dates, you know what matters most each week, which is really powerful. Let me say a few more things about team goals, team plans. Now, a fitness goal, obviously you wouldn't have a team goal for that. But in business, you're going to have you may operate as a team. And a team plan is where two or more, right, are united in executing on a common goal. So we might have a sales goal, or we might have, maybe we're introducing a new product or launching a new product, or some project-based effort we're engaged in. And so we have a common goal, and there's multiple people working on that goal together. That's a team plan. And so same process applies, only typically on something like that, you will find there will be more tactics. Again, we're still looking for the critical few though, the least number to accomplish the goal. Each one of them needs a due date, but as I alluded to earlier, each tactic has one person assigned. So even if I had a tactic and Michael was doing the same thing as me, we would list that tactic twice, one with my name, one with his name, so that there's distinct accountability on each of these actions. And what that does is we talk about clarity of expectation, and where that usually breaks down in an organization is at the planning level, because when we plan conceptually, that clarity doesn't exist. When you plan tactically as a team, there's no question about what's expected from each member on the team to accomplish this goal. And as you walk this out, then what will happen is on a daily, weekly basis, you're going to know, this is the transparency part, you're going to know who's doing it and who's not. So you're going to know who's struggling and where a person needs help and who's doing great. But it starts with getting that kind of clarity, and that clarity comes from a tactical plan. You cannot get that kind of clarity without it, which means you don't get the buy-in, you don't get the ownership. No one's going to be accountable to something that's vague. And so part of the reason why we don't get the ownership, part of the reason why people don't want to step up and be accountable is because the plan is vague. When you plan tactically, you're going to see you get buy-in. Now, the other thing can happen too, is for those people that don't want the accountability, that don't want that transparency, that really aren't going to do the work, they will hate this kind of planning because there's nowhere to hide and because there's such clarity around the expectation for everyone on the team that's involved in working towards that goal. But that's exactly what makes it so powerful. So if you're planning as a team, then you get everyone involved in creating the plan, in determining the tactics, in building the goals, so that we start to get buy-in, we get input. You don't go off in a corner, do it by yourself, and then hand it to them. Okay, but when you start to plan tactically and you plan as a team, it'll change the way the team interacts. It'll change how the team executes. It'll definitely change the results of the organization. So it's really powerful. Whether you're an individual or whether you're operating as a team, goal that's an outcome, tactics that describe the action you can take. Very focused, limited number of goals, critical few tactics. Okay, so that's 12-week planning, right? A goal, specific tactics, and this plan executes so much better than the type of plan most people write. Now, even in our workshops though, sometimes people have a difficult time seeing the difference between a true tactical plan and a conceptual plan. I want to make sure you got that. because this plan executes, this plan produces, this plan leaves the breadcrumb trail, right? You want to plan this way. I get it's a little more uncomfortable, it's a little more work in the planning process, but it pays big dividends on the execution side. All right, I hope this has been helpful. I'm Brian Moran. For more of this, check us out at 12weekyear.com.